the mystique about lightkeepers is, there's this old codger in a rocking chair smoking a pipe with a sou'wester on and reading a book and sitting in front of his coal fireplace and, possibly looking out the window. That's not lightkeeping. Lightkeeping is 3 o'clock in the morning until 11 o'clock at night, and we split that shift between the two keepers. So it's 12 on, 12 off, basically. The life of the keeper is making sure that everything is safe out here for mariners and for aviators. It's reporting whales, it's reporting other sea mammals, it's reporting bird life, unusual things. We even had a submarine go through here one time with a periscope, which we reported to DND, Comox base. So, those kinds of things, they're all part of your day. But, the sort of structured part of your day is the weather reporting every 3 hours and anything in between. If it's doing this and it's doing this in those 3 hours, but it changes and does something else, you have to call that in and say, sorry, it's not blowing 10 anymore, it's blowing 40. And the winds come up and it's changed direction and the sea's horrible, and then that gets broadcast to all these people. When they call it a two-person station, what they're really talking about is it's a two-family station. And, whether you're just a family of 2 or a family of 6, it doesn't matter. Everybody's involved in being the light keepers. So when I was outside working, say, painting a building or up on the tower painting or whatever, if a weather time came up, my wife was also trained. We were trained by Atmospheric Environment Service, and she would be able to go out and do the weather report. My daughter Melissa is standing at the window there one day, and there's a guy coming up in one of the herring skiffs from the herring fishery down in south of here, and he gets into the rip here, and something happened to his motor, and he was back messing around with his motor, and he fell overboard. And he went over the back, and of course the boat, being powerless, got caught by the rip. It's on its way. And he's out there flopping around, didn't look like he could swim, didn't have a life jacket on. And my daughter came, yelling to us, "This guy in the water, he's fell overboard." And so we went on to the VHF radio and reported it immediately to Coast Guard, to the Coast Guard rescue station in Campbell River, but we also called out to some of the people we knew out here. And it was actually one of them that got to the guy and got him up to their boat, kept him his head out of the water, but they couldn't lift him. It took about 4 Coast Guard guys in the Zodiac to get him out of the water and go get his boat. But, things like that happened all the time. They happened all the stations. I heard about a job posting with the Coast Guard for lighthouse keeping. And I thought, what the heck, why not try it? So I put my name in. 7 months later, I was working at Chatham Point Light Station, which is the next light station up from here, about 40 kilometers up the channel, right on the curve of Vancouver Island. I was at Chatham Point for 6.5 years on 7-month contracts, one after another, after another, after another. It was very difficult to leave because we had, developed friendships with people that live in the boonies. A couple of people living on a boat over there or up there or whatever. And, it was great. we went through probably 4 or 5 principal keepers that moved on. You know, they'd stay for 2, they'd move to another principal station. And some were great people and some were not so great. And, you know, living under the thumb of somebody that's not so great was not so great. So we decided, well, you know, it's about time we were in charge, so we applied. That was the reason for moving north, was to take the principal keeper job. So we became the principal keepers. We were totally in charge of the station, and that, you know, adds a little bit of a burden to you because everything is your fault, no matter what. So that station has to be white glove perfect when they come around once a year to examine it, and that's the way we kept it. So when we moved from Boat Bluff, first of all, you have to realize that lightkeepers, when they move from remote stations, have to crate all of their goods. So we had to order in truckloads of plywood, which the Coast Guard delivered by ship. And then we had to build crates for everything, you know, like all of our furniture, all of our precious belongings, anything, you know, just a crate after crate after crate. Washing machines, you know, things like that. You crate them. And then they all get lifted by a helicopter over to the ship, the Coast Guard ship. And they'd sling them out, set them on the deck, put them in the hold. The ship that we used was the Wolf, a retiring icebreaker. And it was the last of the steam-powered ships in the Coast Guard fleet. And it was on pretty much its last voyage from the north, breaking ice, going back south to Victoria. Anyway, they picked us up on a day that nobody should have been out there, even the Wolf, and it was like about hundreds of feet long. And we had to travel from the station to the ship in their little workboats. So their workboats are about, 25 feet long. You know, look like an old lifeboat. That's what they were, basically. And they had a little motor in them, and they'd ferry us back and forth in these horrendous seas. And, you know, I've got these 2 little kids, wife, all our goods, my daughter's turtle in a, in a little mason jar. And we had to go out there and we had to climb a rope ladder up probably 30 feet to the deck. That's how we got onto the ship. And the last step wasn't quite, it was okay for adults, but wasn't good enough for kids. So like I had to carry my son up the ladder, holding on, get up to the top, and had to stand on the top stair, and one of the crewmen from the ship hung over the edge, and I had to toss my son. And he had to be caught by this guy, and he caught him. And he lived. The trip down here was just horrendous. We were crashing through seas that were probably 15 feet in height of wave. And, you know, they'd come right over the bow and over the whole deck, and we were up inside, so it was no big deal. And we made a number of stops at other light stations, and then eventually they came here. Well, it was very difficult to offload here because of the beach. The lifeboats couldn't land on the beach because they're too deep. So they docked at the Argonaut Wharf in Campbell River, where they load all the ore from the mine. And they brought over a Sealander, basically a landing barge from the war. The front end comes down like that. And that landing barge would come up to the ship. They'd load things into the landing barge, bring it over here. We'd carry it up the dock, load it into a moving van, just a cube van, bring it down here, unload it into the house. Luckily, the guys from the ship helped out. We got everything here, and basically that house was full of crates, and your first night, where is the such and such? I don't know. So you had to start tearing things apart right away. And at the same time, you had to start your duties. Your duties included getting up at 3 o'clock in the morning, do a weather report. Every 3 hours after that, all the way till 10:30 at night, you did weather reports. And you came out here, right about where there's a little stand out there that's got the thermometers and stuff in it. And we had a wind gauge out here on a pole. And we would take the readings and we would jot them all down. We did both marine weathers and aviation weathers. So we'd look at this cloud cover that you have today, and we would name the clouds, the type of clouds, and the level where the ceiling was. And that was for Campbell River Airport and the seaplane base and the helicopters in Campbell River in the estuary. They had to have that. They had to know the visibility, they had to know the ceiling, they had to know what sea condition was, especially for the float planes. If they got into trouble and it's 6-foot sea out here, they couldn't land. So they had to know. Anyway, the job was basically maintaining this station. And if you can imagine, if you're a homeowner or whatever, or even a renter that does maintenance, what it's like to maintain one house. Well, we had, as the two keepers, we had minimum 2 houses, garage, workshop, engine room, compressor room for the horns, and the tower. And the tower was the fun part. The tower itself is roughly 60 feet to the top, and we as lightkeepers used to be tasked with painting that tower. We'd do it about every 2 to 3 years, and inside and outside, and pictures of us hanging from ropes and baskets and all kinds of things, and climbing ladders and holding on to that very top cupola where the weather vane is with your fingernails like you're trying to hang on to metal, because it's pretty slippery up there. There's no handholds or anything. First of all, there wasn't a station up until 1898. And at that point, they had a number of horrendous wrecks out here. There some loss of life, but lots of loss of property. Big ships. And, that's back in the day of steam and sail. Mariners petitioned the government, build a light here, for goodness sakes, like we need a light. So they did. Right next to that tower, this side of that tower, they built a 2-story house, 4-bedroom, 2-story house, and on top of it, they had a cupola just like that one on the top of the roof. And the lightkeepers lived in the house, and, they went up the stairway and they did the light. That you could see 15 to 20 miles. So that did the job. Well, you're only talking about 35 feet maybe at the light. Can't see very far down the strait. Well, if you could pass, go around this corner here, you can see Quadra Island. On a good day, you can see, just about to Vancouver down the strait. So all those ships coming up this way or coming from the Sunshine Coast and across, they need to know where that end is and where the channel is. So this wasn't tall enough. 1915, I think it started in '05, they built that tower. It was finished in 1915, and it's been there ever since. It's the only tower on this entire coast and the East Coast that's built entirely with concrete made with fresh water. Because of the construction method, this tower is like the strongest concrete you can imagine. It's about 18 inches thick at the bottom, and then it thins as it goes to the top. 5 floors, I believe 5 levels. It's about 60 feet tall right at the top of the roof. That you could see 15 to 20 miles. The thing that's unique about this station is that the island ends, but there's a shoal that goes out about 2 miles. It's very shallow. And then there's, of course, the channel around both sides, Pseudo Channel on the other side, Discovery Passage here. So people have to basically know where this station is to keep them out there and not up here. And that's what this light is for. As an activist, I sort of got involved with the Union of the Lightkeepers, but the Union of the Lightkeepers was represented by the base workers in Victoria. So in order for us to be represented, we had to go down there. I got elected president and shop steward by the Lightkeepers. So I would go down there about once a month, once every 6 weeks, whatever it took, to go to a union meeting. Okay, I go to the union meeting. The base workers, they were not very fond of lightkeepers. They absolutely did not represent us. And every meeting we went to was a total waste of time. Everything we would bring up, they would just shine it on and say, no, our stuff's more important. But as the president of the union and the shop steward, the Coast Guard had in their contract with the union that every lightkeeper had to be visited once a year by either one of those two people. Well, I was both, so worked out great. But they would give me a helicopter and a pilot, usually in November, when the weather was just perfect. We would go in those horrendous, 50 to 70 knot winds, storm force winds, fly to every light station, land, and I would spend time with the principal keepers as a family, hour or two, and then I'd spend time separately with the assistant keepers. And boy, were there different stories. But sometimes they got along great, sometimes they hated each other. But anyway, that's how I got to see all the light stations. I'd get to go to them, I'd get to tour them, I'd get to see what's there. So I knew them intimately. And I knew their challenges intimately. So eventually I convinced, after a couple of years of doing that, I convinced the lightkeepers globally on the coast that we needed to form our own local. And that was really quite the chore, because I had to go to every single lightkeeper and get their signatures and their agreement to do that. We got it. When I first started lightkeeping in 1978, there was already a move afoot, start automating the equipment. By the early 80s, they started talking more about taking one person off of a station, making it a one-person station. And they were only talking about doing that at stations that had road access. It didn't stop there with that push. They didn't win. But by the time I moved to Cape Mudge in 1985, it became a very serious movement on their part. And that was to get rid of all the lightkeepers eventually. We decided to start an opposition to the movement. And the movement became us creating a petition. And we started pumping those out and distributing them to anybody that would take them in the way of stores, marine stores, gas stations. Eventually got this real buy-in from the public. It made media. It got a lot of buy-in from the public. So people signed the petitions. I'd go around and collect them once a week. I'd get a stack of maybe 10, 12 pages of 25 each, give them some more, move on. And we were doing all this on our own dime. Eventually, we got to the point where they became very serious about it's time to move. I think it was 3 stations. We're going to destaff those 3 stations. And we just went to the media. And at that point, I had no right to go to the media as a Coast Guard federal employee, but I did it. And I got my wrist slapped and everything else. But I figured, what the heck? What am I going to lose? Are you going to fire me? Probably. So we did it anyway. Eventually we had 30,000 signatures gathered from up and down the coast. And I went to our MP at the time and said, look, we got to stop this. This is crazy. He was also a mariner, so he, knew the coast. And he invited me to come back to Ottawa on my own dime once again and present to the House. First to the House Fisheries Committee and then to the General House. If things get tough, the keepers may start to, fall into line and not be as active. So that's a concern. The lighthouse keepers' future, I believe that the government and the bureaucracy, as it stands right now, because see, we had this group, which was the group I was working with, and they all retired. And then we got this group, which started to understand what happened, and they were still on with destaffing, but that group is all retired. And now we've got a new group of people that actually do understand why lightkeepers are important. And they've read the Senate report, and they know that if they propose another round of destaffing, they're going to be the ones that are up against the activists. And they're not just lightkeepers. They're people all up and down this coast that are users. So, that's a very formidable group, I have to tell you. So we have gone through this process of battling with the bureaucracy of Coast Guard and the government in power of the day 4 full times, where we had to mobilize the world to try and keep staff on light stations and be the leaders in the world. Because you cannot replace the human eye, the human ear, human brain. They make decisions about what needs to be done. Do I need to make a phone call? Do I need to run out there in our boat? What do we need to do? Machines can't do that. I don't care which machine it is. There's nothing technologically that can match a human being. Nothing. We've got 27,000 kilometers of convoluted coastline with 27 stations on this coast alone that were put there for a reason. They were put there because it's the most dangerous spot around. And people need to be able to know that. And how else could they know it? Other than having that light there. If the light's not working, nobody knows it. If the horn's not working, nobody knows it.